My son sent me a box of handmade chocolates for my 70th birthday. It arrived with a note about forgiveness and new beginnings. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But when he called me 10 minutes later to ask if I had eaten one, I lied. I told him I had sent the entire box over to his wife and children because they love sweets. The silence on the other end of the line lasted 5 seconds. Then he screamed. "You did what?" His voice shook. His breathing stopped. That was the moment I knew. My son had not sent me a gift. He had sent me an execution order. Before I continue this story, please write the name of your city in the comments. I want to know how far my warning travels. Like and subscribe if you believe family betrayal is the sharpest knife of all. My name is Harlan Ford. For 40 years, I served as the chief of toxicology for one of the largest pharmaceutical conglomerates in the United States. I spent my life analyzing the things people use to hurt one another. I can detect arsenic in a single strand of hair and identify cyanide by the faintest scent of almonds. But nothing in my career prepared me for the analysis I had to perform on my own 70th birthday. The day began in silence. My house in the suburbs of Chicago is too large for one man. It echoes with the memories of my late wife, Catherine, and the childhood laughter of a son who hasn't truly spoken to me in 5 years, at least not without asking for money. When the doorbell rang at 9 in the morning, I wasn't expecting anyone. The courier handed me a heavy velvet-wrapped package. There was no return address, just a card tucked under the ribbon. "Happy birthday, Dad. I know I haven't been the best son lately. I want to fix that. These are for you. Enjoy the dark ones. They are your favorite. Love, Jason." I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the box. It was exquisite. Artisan truffles. The kind that cost $5 a piece. Jason had been claiming poverty for months. He said he couldn't afford new tires for his car. He said he was behind on his mortgage. Yet here was a gift worth at least $200. My training kicked in before my heart did. In my world, discrepancies are dangerous. Why would a man drowning in debt buy luxury chocolates for a father he barely tolerates? I did not open the box. I placed it in the center of the table and waited. I knew he would call. A man who sends a trap needs to know if the trap has sprung. At 9:30, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Jason. I let it ring twice before answering. I needed my voice to sound old. I needed to sound like the frail, lonely retiree he thought I was. "Hello, Jason," I said. "Dad, happy birthday." His voice was tight. It was too high, too fast. It lacked the casual indifference he usually reserved for me. "Thank you, son." I received the package. "It was very generous of you. Did you open it? Did you try them?" The urgency in his tone was unmistakable. He wasn't asking if I liked the gift. He was asking if the mechanism of action had begun. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the unopened box. "They looked delicious, Jason. But you know the doctor told me to watch my sugar. I didn't want them to go to waste." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, a sharp, shallow intake of air. "What do you mean, waste?" "Well, I called a courier service immediately. I sent the whole box over to Beatrice and the kids. You know how much little Leo and Mia love chocolate. They should have received them about 10 minutes ago. Beatrice texted me to say they were eating them right now." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a man watching his world disintegrate. Then the explosion came. "You did what?" "I gave them to your family, Jason. I thought it would be a nice surprise." No, you have to call them. Tell them to stop." "Why? They are just chocolates, aren't they?" Jason's voice cracked into a scream. It was a primal sound, stripped of all pretense. "They are bad. The batch is bad. I just saw a recall notice on the news. Dad, listen to me. Call Beatrice right now. Tell her not to let the kids touch them. Do not let them swallow a single bite. I held the phone away from my ear. His panic was genuine, but it was not the panic of a man worried about a stomach ache or a bacterial infection. It was the panic of a man who had intended to kill one person and accidentally targeted 3 others. He did not want to be a mass murderer. He only wanted to be an orphan with an inheritance. Calm down, Jason, I said, keeping my voice steady. I will call her. But you are overreacting. It is probably just a precaution. Just do it. I am coming over. Do not touch anything. The line went dead. I placed the phone on the table. My hand was steady, but my heart felt like it was bleeding out. He was coming over. Not to save me. Not to visit me. He was coming to destroy the evidence. I did not call Beatrice. I knew she and the children were safe because the chocolates were sitting right in front of me. I had never sent them. I had never called a courier. It was a test, a simple variable injected into the experiment to observe the reaction of the subject. The subject had failed catastrophically. I stood up and locked the front door. Then I picked up the velvet box. It felt heavy like a lead weight. I walked to the hallway and opened the door to the basement. Most people convert their basements into home theaters or gyms. When I retired, I converted mine into a sanctuary. I walked down the stairs, the motion sensor lights flickering on to reveal stainless steel tables, a fume hood, and a gas chromatograph that I had purchased from a liquidating university lab. This was my domain. This was where Harlan Ford, the lonely old man, ceased to exist, and Harlan Ford, the scientist, began to work. I placed the box on the examination table. I put on a pair of latex gloves. My movements were precise. There was no room for emotion here. If I allowed myself to feel the grief of a father, I would miss the details of the scientist. And right now, the details were the only things keeping me alive. I opened the lid. The smell of dark chocolate filled the room. It was rich, earthy, and masking something else. Visually, they were perfect, hand-rolled, dusted with cocoa powder. But I knew better. I took a scalpel and sliced the first truffle in half. The center was a dense ganache. I scraped a small amount into a test tube. I added distilled water and a few drops of hydrochloric acid. I placed the tube in the centrifuge. While it spun, I looked at the photograph on the shelf above my workbench. It was taken 10 years ago. Catherine was smiling, holding a trophy Jason had won at a debate tournament. Jason stood between us, looking proud, looking decent. I tried to pinpoint the moment he changed. Was it when he lost his first job? Was it when he met Serena, the woman who looked at him like a meal ticket? Or had the rot always been there, hidden under the surface, waiting for the right catalyst to bring it out? He had become addicted to easy money. He had borrowed from everyone. He had drained his own savings. And now, apparently, he had decided that waiting for nature to take its course with me was taking too long. The centrifuge beeped. I took the tube out. I needed to run a specific reagent test. Based on the symptoms of his panic, the poison had to be something that acted relatively quickly, but could be mistaken for natural causes if the victim was an old man. Arsenic was too messy. Cyanide was too obvious. I reached for the bottle of potassium iodide. If there was thallium in the chocolate, the solution would turn a specific sickly yellow-green precipitate. Thallium, the poisoner's poison. Tasteless. Odorless. It causes hair loss, nerve damage, and organ failure. It mimics autoimmune diseases. It mimics the slow decline of age. It was a coward's weapon. I added the drops. 1, 2, 3. I held the tube up to the light. The liquid swirled. Then it clouded. A distinct bright yellow precipitate formed and settled at the bottom. Thallium sulfate. The concentration was high. If I had eaten 2 of these truffles, my organs would have begun to shut down within 48 hours. By the end of the week, I would have been in a coma. The doctors would have suspected a stroke or a sudden neurological collapse. No one looks for heavy metals in a 70-year-old man unless they have a reason. My son had not just tried to hurt me, he had tried to erase me. I set the tube down. My hands were still gloved. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the basement. He wanted me dead. The realization was not a sharp pain anymore. It was a dull, heavy fact. It was data. And like any data, it required a response. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Jason again. I peeled off the gloves and answered. "Dad, did you call her? Did you call Beatrice?" He was driving. I could hear the wind noise and the engine revving. He was speeding. He was desperate to get to the house, not to check on me, but to get that box. If he arrived and found the box still here, he would know I lied. He would know I suspected him. And a cornered animal is unpredictable. I need to maintain the illusion. I need to play the part of the confused, compliant father for just a little longer. "I called her Jason," I said. My voice trembled, feigning the anxiety he expected. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. But then I remembered something. What? What did you remember? The box. I didn't give the driver the box. The car noise on the other end shifted. He must have slammed on the brakes or swerved. What are you talking about? You said you sent it. I am getting so forgetful lately, son. I packed it up. I addressed it. But I think I left it on the kitchen counter. I was looking for my glasses, and I must have forgotten to hand it to the driver. I am looking at it right now. It is still here. The relief in his voice was audible. It was disgusting. He let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Dad, listen to me. Do not touch it. Do not open it. I am 5 minutes away. I will come and get it. I will return it to the store and get our money back. You are a good boy, Jason, I said. Always looking out for your old dad. Yeah. Just wait for me. Do not eat anything. He hung up. I looked at the test tube with the yellow sediment. I looked at the beautiful box of chocolates that contained my death. He was coming to sanitize the crime scene. He was coming to play the hero who saved his father from food poisoning. He thought he was 5 minutes away from victory. He did not know that he was 5 minutes away from walking into a web that I had just started to weave. I took the box. I carefully cleaned the scalpel and the table. I removed any trace of the analysis. I put the half-eaten truffle back into the wrapper and molded the chocolate to look like it had been bitten, not sliced. Then I went upstairs. I placed the box back on the kitchen table exactly where it had been. I unlocked the front door. I sat down in my armchair and turned on the television to a game show. I practiced my smile. It had to be the smile of a man who is grateful. It had to be the smile of a man who has no idea that the person walking through the door is a monster. But I did not just sit there. I pulled out my burner phone, a device I kept for consulting work. I still did occasionally under a pseudonym. I sent a text message to Mr. Blackwood. Blackwood is my attorney. He is also the only man on earth who knows the true extent of my assets. He knows that I am not just a pensioner with a paid-off house. He knows about the patents. He knows about the royalties from the anticoagulant drug that 3 million people take every day. He knows that my net worth is north of $15 million. The text was simple. Code Black. Jason. Initiate full financial forensic sweep of my son. I want to know who he owes and how much. I need results by tonight. I put the phone away just as tires screeched in the driveway. The car door slammed. Footsteps pounded up the walkway. The door burst open. Jason stood there. He was pale. His hair was disheveled. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but hadn't been dry cleaned in weeks. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Dad," he gasped. I looked up, blinking slowly behind my glasses. Jason, you got here fast. Where is it? He scanned the room wildly until his eyes landed on the velvet box on the table. He lunged for it. He grabbed it with both hands, clutching it to his chest like it was a holy relic. I got it! I got it! You are acting very strange, son, I said. It is just chocolate. It is Salmonella, Dad. It is a deadly strain. I heard it on the radio. I couldn't live with myself if you got sick. He was lying to my face. He was looking me in the eye, holding the poison he bought to kill me and pretending to save my life. The audacity was almost impressive. Well, that is a shame, I said. They looked so good. I admit I was tempted. I even opened the lid. Jason froze. He looked down at the box, then back at me. Did you eat one? I paused. I let the silence stretch. I watched his pupils dilate. I watched the hope flare in his eyes. He was terrified of getting caught, but he was also desperate for the result. I picked one up, I said slowly. I brought it to my mouth. It smelled like dark chocolate and almonds. Almonds are the scent of cyanide, not thallium, but Jason wouldn't know that. I wanted to see if he reacted to the mention of a chemical signature. He didn't flinch at the word almonds. He just stared. And then the phone rang, I said. It was you, so I put it back. The hope in his eyes died. The relief returned, but it was tinged with frustration. He had come so close. Good, he said. Good. That was lucky. He began to back away toward the door. I am going to take this. I will dispose of it properly. You don't need to worry about anything. He was leaving. He thought he had escaped. He thought the slate was clean. He would go throw the box in a dumpster, and tomorrow he would come up with a new plan. Maybe a fall down the stairs. Maybe a gas leak. I couldn't let him go, not yet. I needed to tighten the noose. Jason, wait, I said. He stopped his hand on the doorknob. What is it, Dad? Since you are here and since you saved my life, I think we should celebrate. Celebrate. Yes, I was going to spend my birthday alone, but now you are here. Why don't you stay for dinner? Call Beatrice. Tell her to bring the kids. I want the whole family here. Jason looked at the box in his hands, then at me. He wanted to leave. He wanted to run. But he couldn't refuse. If he refused, it would look suspicious. He had to play the part of the loving son. I don't know if Beatrice can make it. Nonsense, I said. I will call her myself. I have big news, Jason. Huge news. What news? I stood up and walked over to him. I placed a hand on his shoulder. I felt him flinch. I have been thinking about what you said last month, about how hard things are for you, and I decided I am going to make changes to my will. Tonight. His head snapped up. The greed was instantaneous. It washed away the fear. Your will? Yes. I want to discuss it with everyone present. I want to make sure you are taken care of. Before I go. I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was thinking that maybe he didn't need the poison. Maybe he could get the money the easy way. Maybe he had won after all. Okay, Dad, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Okay. I will call Beatrice. We will be here. Excellent, I said. Oh, and Jason. Yeah. Bring that nice young woman I saw you with last week. The tall one. With the blonde hair. Jason turned white. He stopped breathing for the second time that day. Who? You know, your assistant. The one you were having lunch with. Bring her too, I want to meet the people who are important to you. I smiled. It was a warm, fatherly smile. It was the best lie I had ever told. I don't know what you mean, Dad. Don't be shy. I insist. Dinner at 7. Don't be late. I gently pushed him out the door and closed it. I watched through the peephole as he walked to his car. He looked like a man walking a tightrope in a hurricane. He threw the box of chocolates into the passenger seat and pounded the steering wheel. Then he picked up his phone and started dialing. He wasn't calling Beatrice. He was calling Serena. I turned away from the door. The game had begun. He thought he was coming to dinner to claim his inheritance. He didn't know he was coming to his own funeral. I went back to the basement. I had work to do. I needed to prepare the second course. The lock on the basement door clicked shut behind me, sealing out the rest of the world. The air down here was cooler filtered and smelled faintly of isopropyl alcohol and ozone. It was the scent of truth. Upstairs, I was a retired father celebrating a birthday. Down here, I was a scientist staring into the barrel of a loaded gun disguised as a confection. I placed the velvet box on the stainless steel workbench. The lighting down here was clinical, a stark white LED that left no shadows. It was unforgiving, exactly what I needed. I did not sit down. I stood over the sample like a coroner over a corpse. I pulled a fresh pair of nitrile gloves from the dispenser, the snap of the latex against my wrist echoing in the silence. I selected a clean beaker and a mortar and pestle. I took the truffle I had sliced earlier, the one that had been destined for my stomach. I dropped it into the ceramic bowl. With a steady hand, I began to crush it. The dark chocolate shell cracked, revealing the dense, rich ganache interior. It looked delicious. It smelled divine. The aroma of cocoa and vanilla wafted up a sensory mask designed to hide the chemical agent within. That is the first rule of toxicology. The delivery method must always be more appealing than the payload. I added distilled water and a solvent to the mixture, creating a slurry. I needed to separate the organic compounds, the fats and sugars, from the inorganic material. I poured the dark liquid into a test tube and placed it into the centrifuge. I set the timer for 3 minutes. The machine whirred to life, a low, rising hum that vibrated through the metal table. While it spun, I leaned against the counter and watched the numbers count down. 3 minutes. That was all it took to separate a lie from the truth. I thought about the chemistry of betrayal. It binds tightly, like a covalent bond hard to break without the right catalyst. Jason had not just bought a gun or a knife. Those are weapons of passion. Poison is a weapon of calculation. It requires planning. It requires patience. It requires a special kind of coldness to hand your father death wrapped in a bow and wait for him to swallow it. The centrifuge beeped. The sound was sharp, cutting through my thoughts. I removed the tube. The solids had settled at the bottom, a dark sludge of cocoa mass. Above it floated a clear, slightly turbid liquid. That was the supernatant. That was where the answer lay. I used a pipette to draw off the clear liquid and transferred it to a clean spot plate. Now came the reagent. I reached for the small brown bottle of potassium iodide I kept on the top shelf. If my suspicion was correct, if this was indeed the heavy metal I feared, the reaction would be instantaneous. My hand hovered over the sample. I took a breath. I was about to confirm that my only son was a murderer. A part of me, the father part, prayed for the liquid to stay clear. I prayed to be a paranoid old man who had misjudged a kind gesture. But the scientist in me knew better. The data points were all there. The panic, the sweat, the desperation. I squeezed the dropper. 1 drop, 2 drops. The reaction was violent and immediate. The clear liquid did not stay clear. It swirled, clouded, and then bloomed. A bright, sickly green precipitate formed instantly, settling heavily into the solution. Green. The specific, undeniable signature of thallium. I stared at the color. It was vibrant, almost neon under the harsh lab lights. It was the color of toxicity, the color of death. Thallium sulfate, the poisoner's poison. I set the pipette down on the sterile mat. My heart rate did not increase. Instead, a strange, icy calm washed over me. It was the clarity of the diagnosis. Thallium is a monster. It is odorless. It is tasteless. It dissolves invisibly in water or food. It is the perfect assassin because it hides behind the mask of natural causes. If I had eaten those chocolates, I would not have died immediately. That would have been too merciful. No, thallium takes its time. First, I would have felt a flu-like ache in my limbs, a tiredness in my bones. Then the burning would have started. A peripheral neuropathy, a fire running along the nerves of my hands and feet. I would have gone to the doctor. They would have run standard blood panels. They would have seen nothing. They would have diagnosed me with a viral infection or an autoimmune flare-up. Then my hair would have started to fall out. In clumps, on the pillow, in the shower. My vision would have blurred. My heart rate would have become irregular. My organs would have begun to shut down one by one as the heavy metal interfered with the potassium channels in my cells, essentially starving them of the energy to function. It would have taken weeks. Weeks of agony. Weeks of slow, terrifying decline. And through it all, Jason would have been there. He would have sat by my bedside holding my hand, looking concerned for the doctors playing the grieving son, while he waited for my heart to finally stop so he could cash the check. He did not just want me gone. He wanted me to suffer. Or perhaps he simply didn't care if I suffered as long as he didn't get caught. It was a cruelty so profound it took my breath away. I looked at the green sediment again. It was enough to kill a horse. The dosage in that single truffle was massive. He was impatient. He had overcompensated. An amateur mistake. A professional would have used small doses over months. Jason wanted the money now. I picked up the spot plate and walked it over to the sink, flushing it with copious amounts of water. Though the image of that green stain was burned into my retinas forever. This was not a cry for help. This was not a mistake. This was a premeditated tactical strike on my life. My son had looked at me, at the man who taught him to ride a bike, the man who paid for his college, the man who held him when his mother died, and he had seen nothing but an obstacle. He had seen a walking bank account that needed to be liquidated. I took off my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. The grief I expected to feel was absent. It had been cauterized by the sheer heat of the betrayal. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I was no longer his father. I was his target, and he had missed. I cleaned the workspace meticulously. Every pipette, every beaker was washed, dried, and returned to its place. I left no trace of the experiment. To the untrained eye, this basement was just a storage room for old equipment. I walked back to the desk and picked up the burner phone. The screen glowed in the dim light. I had the confirmation. Now I needed the leverage. I needed to know exactly why he was so desperate that murder seemed like a viable financial strategy. It was time to initiate the next phase. I was done analyzing the poison. Now it was time to analyze the poisoner. I turned off the lab lights, plunging the room back into darkness, and headed for the stairs. The man who walked up those steps was not the same man who had walked down them. That man had died the moment the liquid turned green. The man ascending the stairs was something else entirely. He was the consequence. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. My heart was beating with a slow, rhythmic thud entirely at odds with the adrenaline that should have been flooding my system. I checked the time on the microwave clock. It had been exactly 12 minutes since our last conversation. The timing was impeccable. A man waiting for news of a death does not have the patience to wait an hour. He needs updates. He needs to know if the curtain has fallen. The phone in my pocket began to vibrate against my leg. It was a persistent, angry buzz. I pulled it out. Jason. Calling for the second time. I took a deep breath, not to calm myself, but to adjust my pitch. I needed to strip away the cold, hard edge of the toxicologist and put back on the mask of the doting, slightly confused father. I cleared my throat and slid my thumb across the screen. "Hello, Jason," I said. "Dad. Did you call her? Did you get a hold of Beatrice?" He was panting. I could hear the rush of wind in the background and the hum of tires on asphalt. He was driving, and he was driving fast. The desperation in his voice was palpable, a physical weight traveling through the cellular network. He wasn't just asking a question. He was begging for an alibi. I walked over to the kitchen window and looked out at the empty driveway. The suburban street was quiet. A neighbor was walking a golden retriever. It was a picture of normalcy that felt completely alien to the conversation I was having. I decided to twist the knife. I decided to introduce a new variable into his equation, one that would force a reaction so volatile he wouldn't be able to hide it. "I didn't need to call her son," I said, infusing my voice with a cheerful lightness that felt obscene given what I knew. I was just about to dial her number when my phone chimed. It was a text from Beatrice. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was a vacuum. I imagined him gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes wide, and staring at the road without seeing it. "A text," he choked out. "Yes. A lovely message. She said the package arrived safely. She wanted to thank you. She said the kids were absolutely delighted." I paused for effect. I let the words hang there heavy and suffocating. She said Leo loved the dark chocolate ones especially. He ate 3 of them before she could even stop him. She said he had chocolate all over his face. Isn't that wonderful? I heard a sound that I can only describe as a strangled animalistic yelp. It was the sound of a man watching his life implode. If Leo had eaten 3, and if the dosage was consistent with what I had found in my lab, my grandson would be dead within the week. But Jason wasn't thinking about Leo's life. He was thinking about the autopsy. He was thinking about the police connecting the dots between a dead grandfather and a dead grandson, and realizing that the only common denominator was the man who sent the candy. "No," he screamed. "No, no, no. Jason, what is the matter? You sound hysterical. They ate them. You are sure they ate them?" That is what she said. She said they were delicious. "Why are you shouting?" He was hyperventilating now. I could hear the jagged intake of breath. He was spiraling. He had planned a clean, quiet elimination of an old man. Instead, he was staring down the barrel of a mass tragedy that would put him on the front page of every newspaper in the state. He was terrified, but not of the loss. He was terrified of the exposure. "Dad, listen to me," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Listen to me very carefully. You have to tell them to stop. You have to tell them to go to the emergency room. Right now. The emergency room. Why on earth would I do that? Because the chocolates are bad." "Bad? What do you mean bad? Like expired?" "No, not expired. Defective. I just got an email. From the company." He was lying. He was inventing the story in real time, stumbling over his own fabrication. It was fascinating to watch. It was like observing a rat in a maze, realizing there is no cheese, only electricity. "What kind of email, Jason?" "It is a recall, Dad. A massive recall. They found bacteria. Salmonella. A really bad strain. People are getting sick. Serious hospitalization sick. Salmonella. It was a clumsy lie. Salmonella causes vomiting and fever. It doesn't cause your hair to fall out and your nervous system to disintegrate. But it was the best he could come up with while doing 80 miles an hour on the freeway." "Oh my," I said, letting my voice drop to a whisper. "Salmonella. That sounds terrible. Poor Leo. He has such a sensitive stomach." "Yes. Yes, exactly. That is why you have to call Beatrice. Tell her to induce vomiting. Tell her to take them to the hospital. I am coming to your house. I am almost there. My house. Why are you coming here, Jason? If the kids are sick, shouldn't you be going to them? He froze. I had trapped him. Logic dictated that a worried father would rush to his poisoned children. But a murderer rushes to the source of the evidence. He needed to retrieve the box I supposedly still had. He needed to make sure there were no leftovers for the police to test. He had forgotten in his panic that I told him I sent the whole box away. I need to get the receipt, he stammered. I left the receipt in the bag I gave you. I need it for the insurance. And I need to make sure you didn't keep any for yourself. Did you keep any, Dad? Did you eat one? He was pivoting. He was trying to cover his tracks. I told you, Jason. I sent them all to Beatrice. I didn't want the temptation. Okay. Good. Look, I am 5 minutes away. I am going to swing by, check on you, and then I will go to Beatrice's. Just don't do anything until I get there. Do not call anyone else. I will handle it. He hung up. I lowered the phone and looked at it. He was not going to Beatrice's. He knew that if he showed up there and demanded to see the chocolates, he would expose himself. He was coming here to verify my story. He didn't trust me. He wanted to see my face. He wanted to search my trash cans. He wanted to make sure I wasn't lying. He was 5 minutes away. I moved quickly. I went to the kitchen. I grabbed a glass of water and poured half of it into the sink. I ruffled my hair, messing up the neat part I had combed that morning. I unbuttoned the top button of my shirt. I needed to look flushed. I needed to look like a man who was starting to feel the first twinges of a biological insult. If he thought I was sick, if he thought the poison was already working, he would get careless. He would get confident. And a confident enemy is the easiest one to destroy. I sat down in the armchair facing the door. I placed my hands on my knees to stop them from trembling, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. He had tried to kill me. And when he thought he had killed his own children, his first instinct wasn't to save them, but to construct a cover story. The sound of a car engine roaring up the street shattered the quiet. Tires screeched in the driveway. A car door slammed with the force of a gunshot. The performance was about to begin. I closed my eyes for a second, summoning the image of the green precipitate in the test tube. That color was my anchor. That color was my justification. I heard the key turn in the lock. He still had a key. I had never changed the locks because I never thought I would need to keep my own son out. The door flew open. Jason stood there, framed by the afternoon light. He looked wild. His eyes were darting around the room, scanning surfaces, looking for the velvet box that shouldn't be there. "Dad," he gasped, stepping into the house. I looked up at him, and I let my face sag. I put a hand to my stomach. "Jason," I said, weaky. I think I might have made a mistake." His eyes snapped to mine. The panic in them was instantly replaced by a predatory focus. "What mistake? I told you I sent them all." "But I found one in my pocket. I must have saved it for later." I watched him. I watched him process this. "Did you eat it?" I nodded slowly. "About 20 minutes ago. It tasted a bit metallic." I saw it then. The flash of relief, the relaxation of his shoulders. He wasn't worried about salmonella. He was relieved that the poison was in the right body. He was relieved that his problem was solving itself. "Oh," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming smoother. "Oh, Dad, that's not good." He closed the door behind him and locked it. He wasn't here to help me. He was here to watch. I placed the burner phone on the counter and immediately picked up my landline. My hands moved with the muscle memory of a man who has spent a lifetime adhering to strict protocols. I had approximately 4 minutes before Jason arrived. That was enough time to secure the perimeter of my lie. I dialed Beatrice's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice a melodic contrast to the jagged panic I had just endured with her husband. "Happy birthday, Dad," she said. "I was just about to call you. The kids are making you a card. It has a lot of glitter. I hope you don't mind finding sparkles on your carpet for the next 6 months." Her warmth was a physical blow. Beatrice was a good woman. She worked 2 jobs to support my son's delusions of grandeur. She raised my grandchildren with a kindness that Jason did not deserve, and certainly did not inherit. "Thank you, my dear," I said, infusing my tone with the gentle frailty of a grandfather. "I look forward to it. But listen, I need to ask you something. Has Jason called you in the last 10 minutes? "No," she said, her tone shifting slightly, picking up on a frequency of concern. "I haven't heard from him since this morning. He said he had a big meeting. Is everything okay? Is he with you?" "He is on his way," I said. "But Beatrice, I need you to do me a favor. It is very important." "Of course. Anything." "I told Jason that I sent a package over to your house. A box of chocolates he gave me. I told him the courier delivered it an hour ago." There was a pause. The confusion was evident even through the silence. "But we didn't get a package, Dad. We have been here all morning." "I know," I said. "I lied to him." "You lied." "Why?" "Because I wanted to see what he would do." I did not explain further. I could not tell her that her husband was a murderer. Not yet. The truth would destroy her world, and I needed to control the demolition so that she and the children were not crushed by the falling debris. "Listen to me carefully, Beatrice. If he calls you or if he shows up asking about chocolates, you must tell him you haven't seen them. Tell him no package arrived. Do not tell him I called. Do not tell him we spoke. Just say you know nothing. Can you do that for me?" "Dad, you are scaring me. What is going on?" "I promise I will explain everything tonight. Just trust me. It is a surprise. A game. But I need you to play along. If he asks, you never received anything." "Okay," she said slowly, the reluctance heavy in her voice. "Okay, Dad. I trust you, but please tell Jason to come home soon. Leo has a fever and I might need him to run to the pharmacy later." My grip on the receiver tightened until my knuckles turned white. Leo was sick. My grandson was lying in bed with a fever, and his father was speeding down the highway, not to help him, but to ensure his own father was dead. "I will send him home as soon as I can," I said. "Give the kids a kiss for me." I hung up. The verdict was in. It was irrefutable. If Jason truly believed I had sent the poisoned chocolates to his house, and if he possessed even a single shred of humanity, he would be calling Beatrice right now. He would be screaming at her to pump the children's stomachs. He would be calling 911. He would be tearing the earth apart to save them. But he hadn't called. He hadn't sent a text. He knew I was lying. Or rather, he was terrified that I might be telling the truth, but his self-preservation instinct was stronger than his paternal one. He was coming to me first. He wanted to check the primary target. He wanted to secure the crime scene. If I was dead, he could deal with the collateral damage later. If I was alive, he needed to finish the job or remove the evidence. He was willing to gamble with his children's lives to protect his inheritance. I looked at the phone. That brief conversation with Beatrice had severed the last thread of attachment I had to my son. The man driving toward my house was not family. He was a biological anomaly. He was a pathogen. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I adjusted my collar. I practiced the look of a man who is beginning to feel unwell. I needed to look vulnerable. I needed to look like prey. The contrast between Beatrice's innocence and Jason's malice was the final catalyst. She was baking cakes and worrying about fevers. He was distilling heavy metals and drafting eulogies. She deserved the world. He deserved a cell. I would give them both exactly what they deserved. I went into the kitchen and unlocked the back door just in case. Then I sat in my recliner facing the front entrance. I placed a glass of water on the side table, my hand trembling intentionally as I set it down. Let him come. I was ready. The front door did not just open, it exploded inward. Jason did not walk into the house, he stumbled as if he had been pushed by an invisible gale-force wind. He stood in the entryway gasping for air, his chest heaving beneath a dress shirt that was soaked through with sweat. It was a cold day in November, but my son looked like he had just run a marathon in a sauna. His hair was plastered to his forehead in dark, wet strands. His eyes were wide and manic, darting around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped animal seeking an exit. "Dad," he choked out. He did not look at me. He did not check my face for signs of pallor or sickness. He did not ask how I was feeling. His gaze swept past me and locked onto the kitchen table. There it was. The velvet box. Innocent. Unopened. Waiting. He lunged for it. He crossed the living room in 3 long strides and snatched the box with a violence that knocked over the salt shaker. He clutched it to his chest, wrapping his arms around it, as if it were a bomb that was about to detonate. Thank God. His voice was wet and shaking. It cracked in the middle of the sentence. Thank God you didn't send it. Thank God it is still here. I stayed in my recliner. I let my hand tremble visibly as I reached for the glass of water on the side table. I took a small sip, making sure the glass rattled against my teeth. I needed to sell the performance. I needed him to believe that the mechanism of death had already been engaged. "Jason, you are frightening me," I said, my voice thin and raspy. "What is wrong with the chocolate? Why are you acting like this?" He turned to me then. I saw the whites of his eyes. They were bloodshot. His pupils were dilated pinpricks of fear in a sea of white. "It is salmonella, Dad. I told you on the phone. It is a recall. A massive recall. I just heard it on the radio. People are dying." "Dying?" "Yes. Dying. It is a superbug. Resistant to antibiotics. It causes rapid organ failure." He was babbling. He was mixing his medical metaphors. As a toxicologist, I knew that salmonella does not cause rapid organ failure in an hour. It causes dehydration and misery, but it is rarely a swift executioner. Thallium, however, does exactly what he was describing. He was projecting the symptoms of the poison he had bought attentu to the lie he was inventing. It was a fascinating psychological slip. He was telling me the truth about the outcome while lying about the cause. I looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "But Jason, you said it was a bacterial infection. Why are you acting like it is a weapon?" "It might as well be a weapon," he snapped. He was pacing now, hugging the box to his ribs. The velvet was probably staining his shirt, but he didn't care. "I have to get rid of this. I have to take it back to the store. I have to sue them. They almost killed you." He was already building the narrative. He was the hero. He was the avenger. He was the diligent son protecting his father from corporate negligence. It was a story he could sell to the police if I turned up dead. He could say he tried to save me. He could say he arrived too late. I coughed. It was a dry rattle that I had perfected years ago to get out of boring board meetings. "Jason." "What?" He snapped at me. He was impatient. He wanted to leave. He had the evidence in his hands. He wanted to be gone. He wanted to throw that box into a river and forget this day ever happened. "I am feeling a little lightheaded." He froze. He stopped pacing. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since he burst through the door. Lightheaded. Yes. And my stomach. It feels tight, like a cramp. I saw the calculation behind his eyes. I saw the fear war with the hope. He was terrified of being caught, but he was desperate for the result. If I was sick, it meant the plan was working. If I was sick, he didn't need to worry about the will or the debt or the loan sharks. He just needed to wait. But you said you didn't eat any. You said you put it back. I lied, Jason. He dropped the box. It hit the floor with a dull thud. The sound echoed in the silent house. You lied. I didn't want to upset you. I didn't want you to think I was greedy. But they looked so good. I couldn't resist. How many? He whispered it. It wasn't a question of concern. It was a question of dosage. How many did you eat? Just one. The round one, with the gold flakes. I watched his face crumble. The round one. That was the one I had tested. That was the one loaded with enough thallium sulfate to kill a linebacker. He knew it. He had probably injected it himself. He backed away from me. He looked at the box on the floor. Then he looked at my stomach. One. You ate one. Yes. Is that bad? Is salmonella fatal if you only eat one? He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. Because if he said yes, he was admitting the severity of the poison. And if he said no, he was denying his own hope. He ran a hand through his wet hair. He looked like he was going to vomit. I need water. He went to the kitchen. He turned on the tap. He drank from his cupped hands like a savage. He was falling apart. He had the evidence, but he also had a victim who was still walking and talking. He didn't know what to do. Should he call an ambulance? If he did, they would test my blood. They would find the metal. They would arrest him. Should he let me die? If he did, I might live long enough to tell someone about the chocolates. He came back into the room. He was wiping his mouth with his sleeve. We have to go. Go where? To the hospital. No, I said sharply. I am tired, Jason. I just want to rest. It is probably just indigestion. I am an old man. My stomach isn't what it used to be. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the chair. I made my breathing sound shallow. I saw you. What? I opened one eye. I saw you looking at the clock. You have somewhere to be. You should go, take the box, get your refund. He looked at the box, he looked at me. He was torn. The box was the smoking gun. He had to destroy it. But I was the witness. I will take the box, he said. His voice was hollow. But I am calling Beatrice. I am telling her to come check on you. No, I said. Do not call her. She is dealing with the sick kids. Do not add to her burden. I will be fine. Just go. He hesitated for 1 second longer. Then self-preservation won. It always does with men like him. He grabbed the box off the floor. Okay. Okay. Call me if you get worse. He turned and ran. He didn't walk. He ran out the door. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say happy birthday. He just ran to destroy the evidence of his crime, leaving his father to die in a leather armchair. I watched my son clutch the velvet box to his chest, like a shield. He was breathing hard, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for invisible witnesses. He had the weapon. He had the motive. Now he just needed to know if the bullet had hit the target. He looked at me, his face a mask of sweaty desperation. Dad, he said, his voice trembling. You are sure? You are absolutely sure you didn't touch them? I let a silence stretch between us. I let it grow heavy and uncomfortable. I wanted him to feel the weight of his own actions. I wanted him to sweat. Then I let my hand drop to my stomach. I grimaced a small, sharp wince of pain that was theatrical enough to be noticed, but subtle enough to be believed. "Actually, Jason," I said, keeping my voice low and rough, "I have a confession to make." He froze. The box in his hands dipped slightly. "A confession." "I lied to you on the phone," I said. "I didn't send them all away. I kept one." The color drained from his face so fast it was like watching a light bulb burn out. He took a step back, hitting his heel against the coffee table. You kept one." "Yes. I didn't want you to think I was ungrateful. And they looked so expensive. I felt guilty sending them all to the grandchildren. So before I packed the box, I took one out. Just a little treat for myself." I watched his eyes. They were wide, unblinking. He was doing the math. He was calculating the dosage. He knew exactly how much thallium sulfate he had injected into those truffles. He knew that one was enough to cause irreversible damage. Two was a death sentence. One might be a lingering, painful exit. Which one, he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a plea for data. "The round one," I said. "The one with the gold leaf on top." I saw the recognition hit him. That was the primary target. That was the one he had loaded first. And... "Did you eat it?" I nodded slowly. I leaned forward in my chair, clutching my abdomen tighter. "About an hour ago." "It was delicious, Jason. Very rich. But what?" "It had a strange aftertaste. Metallic. Like I had been sucking on a penny. And now, my stomach. It feels like it is on fire." I let out a groan. It was a good groan. A wet, rattling sound deep in my throat. Jason stared at me. And in that moment I saw the transformation. I saw the sheer terror of being caught evaporate, replaced by something far darker, far more chilling. I saw hope. It was a flicker at first, then a steady burn. He realized that the nightmare scenario poisoning his wife and children was over. They were safe. The only person who had ingested the poison was the person he wanted to kill in the first place. The plan hadn't failed. It had just been delayed. He looked at the box in his hands, then back at me. He realized he was holding the murder weapon, and the victim was sitting right in front of him, already dying. "Oh, Dad," he said. His voice changed. It lost its frantic edge. It became smoother, deeper. It became the voice of a man who thinks he has won. "That doesn't sound good." "No," I rasped. "It really hurts, son. I feel dizzy. My fingers are tingling. Tingling. Peripheral neuropathy. The classic first symptom of heavy metal poisoning. I was feeding him the textbook reaction, and he was eating it up. "It is probably just the salmonella," he said quickly. "It hits fast. You know how sensitive your stomach is." He was gaslighting me. He was telling a man he had poisoned that he just had a tummy ache. He took a step toward the door. I should go. I need to take this box back. I need to file a complaint." "Jason," I said, reaching a hand out to him. My hand shook violently. "I shouldn't be alone. I think I need a doctor. Can you drive me?" He looked at my hand. He looked at the door. He was torn. If he drove me to the hospital, they would run tests. They would find the metal. He would be arrested in the waiting room. But if he left me here, I might call 911 myself. He had to make a choice. He had to gamble on my frailty. "Dad, listen," he said, backing away. "Hospitals are full of germs. You don't want to go there unless it is serious. It is probably just a bug. You need to rest. You need to sleep it off." Sleep it off. He was telling me to lie down and die. But it burns, Jason. It really burns. "Drink some water," he said, his hand reaching for the doorknob. Just drink water and lie down. I will. I will call you in an hour. To check on you. He wasn't going to call. He was going to wait for the coroner to call him. He opened the door. The cold air rushed in. Go lie down, Dad, he commanded. Do it for me. He stepped out. He didn't look back. He didn't say goodbye. He closed the door, sealing me in with my pain, or so he thought. He walked away with a spring in his step, clutching the box of chocolates like a winning lottery ticket. He thought he was leaving a dying man. He didn't know he was leaving the only witness to his crime. I watched through the peephole as Jason scrambled down the walkway. He didn't look back at the house where his father was supposedly dying. He threw the velvet box onto the passenger seat of his sedan with a force that would have crushed the delicate truffles inside. He didn't care about the chocolate anymore. He only cared that the weapon was back in his possession. He reversed out of the driveway without checking for traffic, his tires squealing against the pavement, leaving a streak of black rubber as a parting gift. I waited until his taillights disappeared around the corner. I counted to 10. 1, 2, 3. I let the silence of the house settle back around me. Then I stood up. The trembling in my hands stopped instantly. The stoop in my shoulders vanished. I straightened my spine, feeling the vertebrae click into place. I was not a sick old man. I was a man who had spent 40 years staring down chemical structures that could liquefy a human lung. I walked to the kitchen sink and poured the rest of the water down the drain. I washed the glass, dried it, and put it back in the cupboard. Order. Discipline. Control. I went to my study. It was a small room lined with books on toxicology, forensic pathology, and corporate law. I moved the heavy oak desk slightly to the left and pulled up the corner of the rug. Beneath it was a floor safe. I spun the dial left, then right, then left. The tumblers clicked with a satisfying weight. Inside, next to the deeds and the hard drives, was a black satellite phone. I only used it for one purpose. I dialed a number that wasn't saved in my contacts because I had memorized it 2 decades ago. It rang once. Blackwood, a voice answered. Crisp, professional, no pleasantries. It is Harlan, I said. Initiate the shadow clause. There was a pause on the other end, a pause of recognition, a pause of gravity. Are you sure, Harlan? Once we start this, the audit is invasive. It will trigger alerts. I am sure. My son just left my house. He attempted to administer a lethal dose of thallium sulfate. He believes he succeeded. Thallium. That is ambitious. And messy. He is an amateur, I said coldly. But he is desperate. I need to know why. I need a full financial forensic sweep of Jason Ford. I want to know every debt, every loan, every credit card transaction in the last 24 hours. I want to know who he owes and how much time he has left. I can have the preliminary report in 4 hours, Blackwood said. The deep dive will take 12. Do it. And Blackwood. Yes. Put a tail on him. I need to know where he goes tonight. I have a feeling he isn't going home to his wife. Consider it done. I hung up the phone and placed it back in the safe. The shadow clause was a protocol I had established years ago, a nuclear option designed for the day I feared might come. It gave Blackwood authorization to bypass standard privacy protocols and utilize our network of private investigators and forensic accountants to tear apart a subject's life. I never thought the subject would be the boy I taught to play catch. I walked back to the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The game had changed. Jason thought he was playing against time, waiting for a poison to do its work. He didn't know he was playing against me, and I had just set the board on fire. I went to the basement door and unlocked it. I had a long night ahead of me. I needed to prepare for the results. I needed to be ready to see the true face of my son, stripped of all lies, laid bare in a spreadsheet of debts and sins. Midnight arrived not with the tolling of a bell, but with the silent blue pulse of the satellite phone on my mahogany desk. The house was submerged in darkness save for the singular lamp, illuminating the leather surface where I had spent the last 4 hours waiting. I had poured myself a glass of aged scotch, but I hadn't taken a sip. Alcohol dulls the senses, and tonight I needed the precision of a scalpel. I picked up the phone. There was a single encrypted email from Blackwood. The subject line was a sequence of numbers, the case file code we had established years ago for sensitive internal audits. I opened it. The light from the screen washed over my face, cold and clinical. The report was 20 pages long. It was an autopsy of a living man's financial soul. I skipped the preamble. Blackwood was thorough, but I didn't need the methodology. I needed the pathology. I scrolled to the section titled Liabilities and Outstanding Obligations. The numbers were printed in red, a stark contrast to the white background, looking for all the world like arterial spray. I expected debt. I expected mismanagement. Jason had always been fond of the appearance of wealth, rather than the labor of acquiring it. But I did not expect the magnitude of the hemorrhage I saw before me. $500,000. That was the principal sum. The creditor was listed as a shell company called Obsidian Ventures, registered in the Cayman Islands, but the payment routing number led back to a known front for a syndicate operating out of South Chicago. Loan sharks. The kind who do not send letters of demand. They send men with baseball bats and wire cutters. I read the terms of the loan. The interest rate was predatory, compounding weekly. Jason hadn't just borrowed money. He had sold his future. He was bleeding cash. He didn't have to keep the beast at bay, but the beast was hungry. According to Blackwood's notes, he had missed his last 3 interest payments. The deadline for the balloon payment of the entire principal was 48 hours away. That explained the sweat. That explained the manic energy. My son wasn't just greedy. He was a dead man walking. He had 48 hours to find $500,000 or face consequences that would likely end in a shallow grave. But where did he think he was going to get that kind of liquidity? I scrolled down. The answer was waiting for me in the section titled Collateralized Assets. My breath hitched in my throat. It was the only moment of genuine physical shock I experienced that night. The address listed was 42 Maple Drive, Beatrice's house. The house I had bought for them cash when Leo was born so that my grandchildren would always have a roof over their heads. It was supposed to be a sanctuary. It was supposed to be untouchable. Jason had forged the deed. He had taken out a high-risk second mortgage against the property 3 months ago. He had forged Beatrice's signature on the consent forms. If he defaulted on the loan shark debt, they wouldn't just break his legs. They would take the house. They would throw Beatrice and my grandchildren onto the street. He had gambled their shelter to pay for his vices. The rage that filled me was cold liquid nitrogen running through my veins. He had desecrated the one thing I had given him to protect his family. But the financial report wasn't finished. There was one final attachment, a PDF titled Life Insurance Policy Number 8944. I opened it. It was a policy taken out 10 days ago. The insurer was a major national carrier. The policyholder was Harlan Ford. The beneficiary was Jason Ford. The coverage amount was $2 million. I stared at the screen. I zoomed in on the bottom of the document where the applicant's signature was required. There it was. Harlan Ford. It was a good forgery. He had practiced. He had the slant of the H write the sharp cross of the F, but he had pressed too hard on the downstroke of the D. It was the signature of a man trying to copy a memory, not the signature of a man signing his own name. The pieces of the puzzle snapped together with a terrifying clarity. The debt was the pressure. The house was the collateral he had already lost. The insurance policy was the exit strategy. He needed $500,000 to pay off the sharks. He needed another $300,000 to clear the mortgage before Beatrice found out. And he wanted $1 million left over to run away with. The math was simple. The variable was me. I was the obstacle standing between him and salvation. He had calculated the return on investment of my death. He had spent $200 on poisoned chocolates to yield a $2 million payout. It was a business transaction. I looked at the date on the policy. The contestability period was 2 years for suicide, but for accidental death or sudden illness, it paid out immediately. He had planned this. He had orchestrated the timeline perfectly. He needed me dead before the loan sharks came to collect on Tuesday. I set the glass of scotch down on the coaster. The condensation dripped down the side, pooling on the leather. My son had looked at me at the father who raised him and saw nothing but an asset to be liquidated. He had signed my death warrant with a steady hand. I picked up the satellite phone and dialed Blackwood. "I have read it," I said. "It is bad," Harlan Blackwood said. His voice was grave. "The creditors he is involved with are not bankers. They are butchers. If he doesn't pay by Tuesday, they will hurt him." "Let them," I said. "Harlan, he forged my signature, Blackwood. He forged Beatrice's signature. He mortgaged his children's home. And he took out a policy on my life to pay for his mistakes. He didn't just try to kill me. He tried to cash me in." "I know. What do you want to do?" "I want to buy the debt." Silence. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Obsidian Ventures. Find out who the handler is. Reach out through our intermediaries. I want to buy the note. I want to own his debt. I want to be the one holding the leash. That will cost you $500,000 plus the premium they will demand for the transfer." "Money is not an issue," I said. "I have $15 million sitting in offshore accounts collecting dust. I would pay double that to see the look on his face when he realizes who his new master is. It will take time to arrange. You have until morning. Buy the debt." "And Blackwood?" "Yes. Send the originals of the forged insurance policy to the fraud department of the insurance company. But tell them to hold the investigation for 48 hours. I want him to think the policy is valid. I want him to think he has won." "Understood." I hung up. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the ceiling. The shadows in the room seemed to lengthen, stretching out like the bars of a cage. Jason was trapped. He was trapped by the sharks, trapped by the lies, and now trapped by me. He thought he was racing against a biological clock, waiting for the thallium to stop my heart. He didn't know that I had just stopped his. I had cut the financial oxygen supply. I closed the laptop. The screen went black. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, sipping my scotch, and waited for the dawn. I had a busy day ahead of me. I had to play the role of the dying man one last time, and then I had to introduce my son to the reality of his inheritance. I sat in the darkness of my study, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I stared at the figure in red ink. $500,000. It was a staggering sum for a man who couldn't hold down a job. It was a life-ending amount for a gambler. But for me, it was a rounding error. Jason had always underestimated me. It was the fatal flaw in his character. He looked at my worn cardigans, my 10-year-old sedan, and my modest suburban home, and he saw mediocrity. He saw a man who had played it safe, who had punched a clock for 40 years and retired with a pension that barely covered the heating bill. He saw what I wanted him to see. He saw the camouflage. He did not know about the patents. I closed my eyes and let my mind drift back 30 years. I was not just a toxicologist. I was an innovator. I was the lead researcher on the team that synthesized voraxidrine, a specialized enzyme inhibitor used in chemotherapy protocols across the globe. It wasn't a glamorous drug. It didn't make headlines. But it was essential, and I owned a 3% stake in the gross royalties. 3% sounds small, but when a drug is administered in 40 countries, 3% is a river of gold. Every month for the last 25 years, a deposit has been made into a blind trust in the Cayman Islands. It fluctuates, but it averages roughly $80,000 every single month. I did the math in my head. My son was killing me for a $2 million insurance payout. He was risking life in prison for a sum I could access with a single phone call and a wire transfer code. If he had just been honest, if he had just come to me and said he was drowning, I could have written a check that would have cleared his debt before lunch. But I never told him. I never told anyone except Blackwood. Even Catherine only knew the half of it. I kept it secret for a reason. It was an experiment, perhaps the most important one of my life. I had seen what happened to the children of my colleagues. I watched them grow up in mansions driving Porsches they didn't earn, drifting through life with a sense of entitlement that rotted their souls from the inside out. They were soft. They were useless. They were parasites. I wanted Jason to be different. I wanted him to have a spine. I wanted him to know the value of a dollar earned through sweat and sleepless nights. I wanted him to build his own empire, not squat in the ruins of mine. I thought that by withholding the safety net, I would force him to learn how to fly. I gave him a good education. I paid for his college. I gave him a down payment for his first house. I gave him the tools, but I refused to give him the finished product. I looked at the photograph on my desk. Jason at graduation. Smiling, hopeful. Where had I gone wrong? I thought I was teaching him resilience. Instead, I was breeding resentment. He didn't see my frugality as a lesson. He saw it as a punishment. He saw it as stinginess. He looked at my bank account, the one he knew about, and saw a pile of cash that he deserved simply by virtue of sharing my DNA. He didn't want to work. He wanted to inherit. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, sharper than the scotch I was nursing. I had hidden the money to save him from becoming a monster, and in doing so, I had created one anyway. He had become a monster not because he had too much, but because he thought he had too little. He was starving in a pantry full of food because he refused to learn how to use the can opener. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a ledger. It was old-bound in cracked leather. Inside, I had tracked the growth of the trust. $15 million. That was the war chest. That was the power I held in my hands. Jason thought he was playing a game of checkers against a senile old man. He didn't know he was sitting across the table from a grandmaster with a nuclear arsenal. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. My experiment had failed. The subject had rejected the treatment and developed a malignant pathology. There was no saving him now. There was only containment. I had the money to crush him. I had the money to buy his debts, to foreclose on his future, to strip him of every illusion he held dear. He wanted my wealth. He was about to find out exactly how heavy that wealth could be when it was dropped on his head. I picked up the phone again. It was time to identify the other variable in this equation. The woman. Serena. The one who was likely whispering in his ear, telling him that poisoning his father was a sound business decision. I needed to know who she was. I needed to know what she wanted. And I needed to know if she was worth more to me than she was to Jason. Because everyone has a price, and I was the only one who could afford to pay it. The secure server pinged softly in the silence of my study. It was a sound that signaled the arrival of the final piece of the puzzle. I sat forward, adjusting my glasses, and opened the encrypted file sent by the private investigator Blackwood had contracted. The timestamp on the photos was less than an hour old. The location was the Meridian Tower, a glass needle of a building in the downtown district, where rent for a one-bedroom apartment cost more than Jason earned in 3 months. The first photo showed my son's car parked in the loading zone. He was out of the vehicle walking toward the lobby. The body language was unmistakable. The slouch of desperation was gone. He was walking with a swagger. His head was high. He was smiling. It was the smile of a man who believes he has just gotten away with the perfect crime. He thought I was at home writhing in agony while he was here about to step into a life of luxury he hadn't earned. The second photo was taken in the hallway of the 34th floor. The door to apartment 34B was open. A woman stood in the frame. Serena. She was striking. Tall, with platinum blonde hair cut in a sharp, expensive bob. She wore a silk robe that looked like it cost a mortgage payment. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and was reaching out for Jason with the other. Even in a static image, the dynamic was clear. Jason was leaning toward her, desperate, pleading for approval. She was leaning back, cool, appraising. She wasn't looking at him with love. She was looking at him like a gambler looks at a winning ticket. But it was the third photo that made the air leave my lungs. The investigator had used a telephoto lens to capture them through the uncurtained living room window. They were embracing. Serena's head was thrown back, laughing. And there, resting against her throat, caught in the glare of the apartment's chandelier, was a necklace. A double strand of Akoya pearls with a vintage rose-shaped diamond clasp. I stopped breathing. I reached out and touched the screen, tracing the pixels. I knew that clasp. I knew the weight of those pearls. I had bought them for Catherine on our 30th anniversary. She had worn them to our son's graduation. She had been wearing them in the portrait that hung in the hallway. 2 years ago, Jason had called me in a panic. He said he had stopped by the house to check on things while I was at a conference and found the back door jimmied open. He said the jewelry box was gone. He filed the police report himself. He sat at my kitchen table and cried, telling me how sorry he felt that Mom's things were stolen. I had comforted him. I had told him they were just things, that his safety was what mattered. He hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen his mother's memory. He had taken the most precious artifact of my marriage and draped it around the neck of the woman who was helping him murder me. The violation was so absolute, it was almost physical. It wasn't just greed. It was a complete absence of soul. I stared at Serena. I analyzed her. She was the variable I hadn't accounted for until now. Jason was weak. He was lazy. He was a follower. He didn't have the intellectual capacity to execute a thallium poisoning without guidance. He wouldn't know the dosage. He wouldn't know the symptoms to fake. But she looked sharp. She looked hungry. I looked at the way her hand gripped his lapel. She was steering him. She was the architect. She was the one who found the loan sharks, and when the debt got too heavy, she was the one who suggested the solution. Kill the old man, take the insurance, sell the house, keep the pearls. She was the toxic catalyst. He was just the unstable element waiting to explode. I saved the photos to my hard drive. I printed the one of the necklace on high-gloss paper. I wanted to have it in my pocket. I wanted to be able to touch it when I looked her in the eye. I realized then that I wasn't just going to destroy Jason. I was going to destroy her too. She had made the mistake of wearing her trophy before the game was won. She thought she was untouchable in her high tower, drinking my son's borrowed champagne. She didn't know that the man she was trying to kill was the one paying for the roof over her head. The investigative report noted that the lease on the apartment was in Jason's name, paid for by the credit cards he had fraudulently opened in my name. I owned the debt. I owned the apartment. And soon I would own them. I closed the laptop. The rage was no longer a fire. It was a glacier. Massive, unstoppable, cold. I checked the time. It was 3:00 a.m. In 14 hours they would be sitting at my dining room table. They would be expecting a dying man to sign over his fortune. I needed to get some sleep. I needed to be fresh. I had a performance to give, and I wanted to make sure I was wide awake when I watched their world fall apart. The sun rose over the suburbs with a cheerful indifference that felt like a personal insult. I had not slept. I had spent the hours between midnight and dawn constructing the final act of a tragedy that would leave my son destitute. I showered, but I did not shave. I needed the stubble. I needed the gray shadows on my jaw to match the hollowness I was about to project. I skipped breakfast. Hunger makes the hands shake and the temper short, both useful traits for a man supposedly dying of heavy metal poisoning. At 9 o'clock, I sat in my armchair, the leather cold against my back. I placed a glass of water next to me, half empty, looking stagnant. I practiced my breathing. Shallow, ragged. I visualized the thallium ions attacking my potassium channels the way the textbooks described it. I needed to embody the science. I picked up the phone and dialed Jason. It rang 4 times. He was likely asleep, exhausted from a night of celebrating my imminent demise with champagne and stolen pearls. Hello, his voice was thick with sleep and irritation. Jason. I let the word drag out, a weak, gravelly exhale. Dad, I don't feel good, son. It got worse during the night. The irritation vanished instantly, replaced by that sharp, hungry alertness I had come to recognize. Worse, how? What are you feeling? My legs. They feel heavy, like lead, and my feet. They are burning. Pins and needles. It hurts to walk. I heard the rustle of sheets on the other end. He was sitting up. He was waking up Serena. He was probably giving her a thumbs up. Peripheral neuropathy. The textbook progression. He thought the clock was ticking down. Did you call a doctor? He asked the question purely performative. No. No doctors. I don't want to die in a hospital, Jason. I want to stay here. In my chair. Dad, don't talk like that. You aren't going to die. I am, Jason. I know I am. I can feel it. The machine is breaking down. I let out a cough, a wet hacking sound that tore at my throat. Listen to me, son. There isn't much time. I have been thinking all night. About the money. About the house. Yes, I haven't updated my will in 10 years. It is a mess. It leaves everything to charities that don't even exist anymore. If I go now, the state will take a chunk. It will be tied up in probate for months. I heard him inhale sharply. Probate. The word was kryptonite to a man who owed $500,000 by Tuesday. He couldn't wait months. He couldn't even wait weeks. We can fix that, Dad. We can fix it. I need to do it today, Jason, right now. I need to sign everything over to you. I want you to have it all. The house, the accounts, everything. I want to make sure you are safe. I choked back a sob that was entirely manufactured. Okay, Dad. Okay, I can come over. I can help you write it. No, it has to be legal. It has to be binding. My handwriting. I can barely hold a pen. I need someone to type it. Someone to witness it. I paused, letting him scramble for a solution. Do you still have that assistant? The smart girl. The one who helped you with your taxes. I was feeding him the line and he swallowed it whole. Serena. Yes. Is she a notary? Can she draft a legal document? She. Yes. She has paralegal training. She can do it. Bring her, Jason. Bring her over. And bring Beatrice. I want everyone here. I want to say goodbye properly. Beatrice. Do we really need Beatrice? Yes. She is family. I want her to witness it. I want there to be no doubts. I could hear the hesitation. Bringing his wife and his mistress into the same room was a risk. But the reward was $15 million. Greed always wins over caution. Okay. I will get them. We will be there in an hour. Hurry, son. I feel very tired. I hung up the phone. The trap was set. He was bringing the wolf right into the sheepfold, thinking he was the shepherd. He didn't know that I was the one holding the gate open. I stood up, my legs strong and steady. I went to the kitchen and opened the cabinet. I took out a small vial of ipecac syrup. An old trick, but effective. A tiny dose would induce a sheen of sweat and a pallor that no makeup could replicate. I took a drop on my tongue. The bitterness was grounding. I went back to my chair and waited. I looked at the empty space on the wall where Catherine's portrait used to hang before I moved it to the safe room. They were coming. The son who wanted me dead, the woman who wore my wife's stolen jewels, and the wife who was too good for any of us. I closed my eyes. The stage was set. The actors were taking their places, and I was about to deliver the performance of a lifetime. Beatrice arrived first. She came through the door with Leo and Mia trailing behind her like ducklings. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and unpaid bills. She hugged me gently, smelling of laundry detergent and baby powder. "Dad," she whispered against my ear. "I didn't tell Jason anything, but please tell me what is going on. You look terrible." I squeezed her hand. My skin was clammy from the ipecac syrup I had ingested an hour earlier. The nausea was real, a rolling wave in my gut that made the act of standing difficult. "I will explain soon," I promised. "Just trust me, and keep the kids away from the dining table until I say so." Then Jason arrived. He walked in with the confidence of a man who believes he has already won the lottery. And trailing behind him, clutching a leather portfolio like a shield, was Serena. She was even more striking in person than in the surveillance photos. She wore a charcoal gray suit that was cut too sharp for a simple legal assistant. Her heels clicked against my hardwood floors with a military cadence. She didn't look at the family photos on the wall. She looked at the furniture. She looked at the silver candlesticks. She was appraising the inventory. "Mom Hod," Jason said, his voice booming with false cheer. "This is Serena. She is a notary public and a paralegal. She is going to help us with the paperwork tonight." Serena extended a hand. Her nails were painted a deep blood red. "Mr. Ford," she said, "it is a pleasure. Jason has told me so much about you." I took her hand. It was cold. I let my grip tremble. I let my arm shake so violently that she had to step forward to support my weight. "Thank you for coming, my dear," I rasped. "I apologize for the imposition. I don't have much time." She exchanged a glance with Jason. It was a micro-expression, a fleeting tightening of the lips that screamed victory. They thought I was fading fast. We moved to the dining room. I had ordered food from a local Italian place, but the platters sat untouched in the center of the table. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. It smelled of oregano and betrayal. I sat at the head of the table. Jason sat to my right, Serena next to him. Beatrice sat on my left, closest to the kitchen, ready to serve, ready to help. Leo and Mia were playing quietly in the living room, oblivious to the fact that their father had tried to turn them into collateral damage. I looked around the table. This was it. The Last Supper. I picked up my spoon. I reached for the bowl of soup in front of me. I needed to sell the neurological decline. Thallium attacks the peripheral nervous system first. Loss of motor control. Tremors. I lifted the spoon. I let it hover halfway to my mouth. Then I started to shake. It started in my fingers, a rhythmic twitching that rattled the silverware against the china. I watched Jason. He was staring at my hand, mesmerized. He wasn't eating. He was watching the poison work. He was watching his inheritance manifest in the tremors of my wrist. "Dad," Beatrice said, her voice laced with panic. "Dad, let me help you." She started to rise from her chair. "Sit down, Beatrice," Jason snapped. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me. He wants to do it himself. Don't baby him. I let the spoon slip. It clattered loudly into the bowl, splashing broth onto the tablecloth. I let out a gasp of frustration, dropping my hand to the table as if it were a dead weight. I can't, I whispered. I can't feel my fingers. It is like they are asleep. Serena leaned forward. She pulled a pen from her portfolio. Maybe we should get the signatures done now, Mr. Ford, before you get too tired. She was efficient. I had to give her that. She didn't care about the soup. She cared about the ink. Yes, I said. Yes. You are right. I don't think I can last through dinner. Beatrice looked from Jason to Serena, her confusion morphing into suspicion. What signatures? She asked. What is going on here, Jason? Why is there a notary here? Dad is sick. We should be calling an ambulance, not signing papers. Jason turned to her. His face was flushed. He looked like a man trying to hold back a tidal wave with a paper cup. Dad wants to get his affairs in order, B. He is being practical. He wants to make sure we are taken care of. Taken care of? Beatrice looked at me. Dad, you aren't dying. It is just a stomach bug. Why is everyone acting like this is the end? Because it feels like the end. Beatrice, I said. I looked at her with sad, tired eyes. I felt a pang of guilt for using her fear, but it was necessary. The nausea from the ipecac surged. I grabbed a napkin and pressed it to my mouth, dry, heaving. It was a visceral, ugly sound. Jason jumped back, revulsion plain on his face. Serena merely opened the document on the table, smoothing the paper with a flat hand. Just sign here, Mr. Ford, she said softly. And then you can rest. I looked at the document. It was a power of attorney and a transfer of deed. It gave Jason everything. It left Beatrice with nothing. I reached for the pen. My hand shook so hard I dropped it twice. Jason picked it up and pressed it into my palm, his fingers warm and sweaty against my cold skin. You can do it, Dad, he urged. Just sign your name. I brought the pen to the paper. I hesitated. I looked up at Jason. I am scared, son, I said. It hurts. I know, Dad. I know. Just sign it. It will be over soon. He was right. It would be over soon. But not in the way he thought. I dropped the pen again. I slumped back in my chair, letting my head loll to the side. I need a moment. I groaned. I feel faint. Water, Serena barked. Get him water! Beatrice rushed to the kitchen. Jason stayed put, his eyes glued to the unsigned paper. He was so close. He could taste it. I watched him through half-closed eyes. I saw the greed. I saw the impatience. I saw the utter lack of love. And then I prepared to drop the bomb. Beatrice returned with a glass of water, her hands trembling slightly as she held it to my lips. I took a sip, letting the cool liquid soothe the raw burn in my throat caused by the ipecac. I coughed a wet, rattling sound that made Jason flinch. He was still holding the pen, hovering over the document, like a vulture waiting for the carcass to stop moving. I am feeling better, I lied, pushing the glass away. The fog is lifting. Jason exhaled a sharp hiss of relief. Good. That is good, Dad. Now let's just get this done so you can go lie down. He tried to press the pen back into my hand. I looked at it. It was a cheap ballpoint gnawed at the end, a fitting instrument for a cheap betrayal. I didn't take it. Instead, I placed my hands flat on the table. I stopped the shaking. I sat up straighter, letting the slump in my spine vanish. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Jason blinked. What? I said no. I am not signing this. Serena stiffened. Her eyes, which had been scanning the room with bored avarice, snapped to my face. "Mr. Ford," she said, her voice tight, "we really should complete the process while you are lucid. It is for your own peace of mind." I looked at her. I looked at the diamond necklace resting against her throat, my wife's necklace. The anger I had been banking down flared hot and bright, but I kept my voice icy. "Peace of mind," I repeated. "You are right. I have been doing a lot of thinking in the last hour. About legacy. About what we leave behind." I turned to Jason. He looked like a man watching a lifeboat drift away without him. "I have decided that I cannot sign this transfer, Jason. It would be immoral." "Immoral? Dad, what are you talking about? It is standard. It is just keeping it in the family." "Is it?" I looked at Beatrice. She was watching me with wide, fearful eyes, holding her children's hands in the doorway. "I have realized that I have been selfish," I said. "I have hoarded my resources. I have lived a small life. I want my death to mean something more. I want to make a statement." I paused. I let them lean in. "I am changing the terms," I announced. "I am leaving this house, and nothing else to Beatrice and the grandchildren. They need a roof over their heads." Jason's mouth opened, but no sound came out. And the rest I continued, my voice gaining strength. "The savings, the retirement accounts, the insurance policies. I am instructing my lawyer to liquidate everything, every penny. I am donating the entire estate to the National Toxicological Research Fund." The silence that followed was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum before an explosion. You are donating it," Jason whispered. "Yes, all of it. It is a noble cause, don't you think? Advancing the science of poisons, helping to detect invisible killers." Serena stood up so fast her chair scraped violently against the floorboards. Her composure cracked. The mask of the professional paralegal slipped, revealing the desperate, clawing greed underneath. "You can't do that," she shrieked. Her voice was shrill, piercing. "You can't just give it away. That is insane. You are clearly not in your right mind." I looked at her calmly. "And why does that concern you, my dear? You are just the notary, aren't you? A neutral third party. Why do you care where the money goes?" She froze, realizing her mistake. Her face flushed a mottled red. She looked at Jason, her eyes wide with panic. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking about the loan sharks. She was thinking about the debt that was due on Tuesday. If I donated the money, Jason got nothing. If Jason got nothing, he couldn't pay. And if he couldn't pay, they were both dead. "Jason, do something," she hissed. Jason looked at me. He looked like he was going to be sick. The sweat on his forehead was real now. "Dad, you can't. You can't do this to me. I am your son. I am your only son. So you owe me. You have to take care of me." "I owe you nothing," I said softly. "I gave you life. I gave you an education. I gave you a start. If you squandered it, that is not my debt to pay." "But I need it," he wailed. It was a pathetic sound. "I need the money, Dad. You don't understand." I leaned forward. I stared deep into his eyes. "Why do you need it so badly, Jason? Is it the gambling? Is it the debt? Or is it her?" I flicked my eyes towards Serena. "Is it high maintenance keeping a notary on staff these days?" Jason flinched as if I had slapped him. "Dad, stop. Just sign the paper. Please, I am begging you." I picked up the document. I looked at it one last time. The clause transferring the deed. The clause granting power of attorney. It was a death warrant disguised as a legal brief. I ripped it in half. Then I ripped it again. I dropped the pieces onto the untouched plate of pasta. "No," I said. "The donation stands. Beatrice gets the house. You get nothing. Serena made a sound of pure fury. She lunged across the table, grabbing Jason's arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. "Fix this!" she snarled at him, abandoning all pretense. "Fix this right now, or I swear to God, Jason, I will leave you to the wolves." Jason looked at her, then at the torn paper, then at me. He was cornered. He was out of options. The poison hadn't worked fast enough. The manipulation had failed. The legal route was dead. He stood up, his chair clattering backward, his face twisted into a mask of ugly, raw desperation. "You are not donating anything," he shouted. "You are sick. You are confused. You don't know what you are doing." "I know exactly what I am doing," I said. Beatrice stepped forward, finding her voice amidst the chaos. "Jason, stop it. Stop shouting at him. Can't you see he is ill?" "He is not ill," Serena spat, turning on her. "He is a senile old fool who is throwing away millions of dollars." "Millions," Beatrice repeated, confused. "But Jason said Dad only had the pension." The slip was fatal. Serena clapped a hand over her mouth, but the word was out. Beatrice looked at Jason. I looked at Jason. "Millions, Jason?" I asked quietly. "How did she know about the millions? I thought you told me you were just scraping by." Jason was hyperventilating. The room was shrinking around him. He looked at the velvet box sitting on the sideboard where he had left it. He looked at me, still breathing, still talking, still destroying his life. He needed a new plan. And he needed it in the next 10 seconds. The tension in the dining room was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on the mahogany table where my legacy had just been torn into confetti. Jason was hyperventilating, his chest heaving as he stared at the shredded power of attorney. Serena was vibrating with a rage so intense it seemed to crack the heavy layer of makeup she wore. I sat still, a dying king on his throne, watching the court dissolve into chaos. Then the swinging door to the kitchen pushed open. It was Beatrice. She had slipped away during the shouting match, presumably to shield the children from their father's meltdown, or perhaps to find some domestic task to ground herself in the middle of this insanity. She walked back into the room, carrying a porcelain serving platter. The sound of her footsteps was the only noise in the room. She moved with a hesitant grace, her eyes darting between Jason's flushed face and my calm one. She was trying to be the peacemaker. She was trying to bridge the gap with the only tool she had left, hospitality. "I thought we could all use something sweet," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "to calm our nerves." She placed the platter in the center of the table, right on top of the torn legal documents. My heart did not speed up. It stopped. For a second, I felt a genuine flash of admiration for the universe's sense of irony. Arranged neatly on the white china dusted with cocoa powder and glistening under the chandelier light were the truffles. The same truffles Jason had snatched from my living room 3 hours ago. The same truffles he had thrown into his car to destroy. I looked at Jason. His eyes were bulging. He looked like a man seeing a ghost. He made a low strangling sound in the back of his throat, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned the color of bone. Beatrice smiled, a weak, hopeful expression that broke my heart. "I went out to your car to get the kids' tablets, Jason," she explained, oblivious to the fact that she had just placed a biological weapon on the dinner table. "I saw the box on the passenger seat. You told Dad they were recalled, but I looked them up on my phone in the kitchen. There is no recall on this brand. I checked the FDA website." She laughed nervously, looking at me. "I think Jason was just trying to save them for himself, Dad. You know how much he loves dark chocolate. But I thought since it's your birthday, we shouldn't be stingy." She reached out and nudged the platter towards Serena. "Please help yourself. They are artisan, very expensive." The scene was frozen in a horrific tableau. Beatrice, the innocent catalyst, offering death on a plate. Serena, the mastermind, staring at the chocolates, so with a mix of confusion and greed, unaware that the pearls around her neck were not the only stolen things in the room.